You guys ready? Did you download your...
I'm just all over the place here.
Your mouse working?
No, you stole my mouse. This is not my regular mouse.
Somebody shuffled this.
Oh, there's a lot of whining from that end today. What's going on?
Wow, when the mayor steals your mouse.
Oh, I hear you.
Oh, worse one? What is it? Is it working?
It's, yeah, well, I got this.
Okay. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Council Chambers for this beautiful April 25th. Welcome to the regular council meeting. And again, today is meeting in person, and we have one member of council that is meeting and joining us virtually as he is not feeling well, so making sure that we protect our staff and members of council. Councillor Laurie will be joining us virtually. Deputy Mayor, adoption of the agenda, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council adopt the April 25th, 2022 regular council meeting agenda as presented.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Administration, anything to add? Okay, with that, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. Moving on to number 3, which is the public input session. This is the time that we allow residents to address council on anything that's not on the agenda. So anything with concerns, suggestions, or just overall just comments to members of council. Administration, has anybody registered?
No, Your Worship, no one registered.
Thank you. Seeing that nobody has registered, has anybody in the audience or the gallery like to speak to council and address council on anything that's not on the agenda? Okay, see none. Moving on to number 4 of our agenda, which is presentations and delegations. We have one presentation today. As a presenter always says, that this is the driest part of his career, is coming to councils and presenting the financial statements. Welcome, Mr. Dirks. Thank you, and just please again speak directly into the mic, as our audio and visual isn't.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I think it was you that said this was the driest part of your career. Anyways, I wasn't on the public input session, but I will say driving down 5th Meridian, I believe it is, was much nicer than it has been in the past. So,
thank you.
I know it's not your road, but what an improvement. So anyway, good afternoon. My name is Phil Dirks, and I'm a partner with Metrics Group, Chartered Professional Accountants, and I'm happy to be here to say a few words about the town's 2020 financial statements and audit. So hopefully I won't take up too much of your time, but by all means, if you have questions, let me know. I'll try to hit the important parts. So just before I talk about the financial statements, sorry, there we go. Just going to say a few words about our auditor's report. So as part of Canadian auditing standards, at the end of our work, the auditors attach a auditor's report to the financial statements. There's a couple things that are important in the auditor's report. Probably the most important to council would be the auditor's opinion, which is at the top of the auditor's report. And in there, we are stating that the financial statements are in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So those are the accounting standards that all local governments in Alberta and most of Canada use in completing their financial statements. So, you know, if you looked at any other municipality in Alberta, report should look fairly similar, other than a couple of names and maybe some dates. Middle of the page, or middle of the report goes on to talk about management's responsibility for the financial statements. So, you know, our job is to provide an audit, complete an audit, and provide an opinion. Management is responsible for those statements and for internal control. Goes on to talk about what the auditor's responsibilities are. Just to summarize, probably the most important thing in the auditor's report about that is that our objective is to attain reasonable assurance whether the financial statements are materially misstated. So what's reasonable assurance? It would be a high level of assurance, but it would never be a guarantee that, we would never say 100% for sure that there was not some kind of a misstatement, just because some of the audit evidence that we look at may be persuasive rather than conclusive, those types of things. So overall, the audit went very well. Thanks to Terry and the finance staff for all their help in helping us get to where we are today. So that's all I'll say about the auditor's report. So if we move on to some of the financial statement numbers, you might notice that these numbers are a lot shorter than the numbers in your actual financial statements, so I shaved three digits off the back. Accountant's gone wild. I think it's a little bit easier to look at. So anyways, financial assets. So you can see at the middle of the page here, the town had $47 million of financial assets. So financial assets are things that are either cash or very close to cash. You can see there's almost $10 million of cash in the bank at the end of the year. So we confirmed those balances with the financial institutions. Receivables. Receivable is a key area for any audit, primarily because we want to make sure that those things are going to get paid. The receivables that are owed to the town will get paid. So there's a couple of things to note there. Town did not have a need for an allowance for doubtful accounts, so that's good to see. Everything that we looked at suggested that there wasn't a need for that. A couple other points to mention there. You can see there's quite a decrease from last year. So taxes were actually down by about $775,000. So that was due to a tax sale on one of the properties and collection of those taxes. And then there was also, collection last year, 2020, there was about $700,000 included for our CMP lease with the city of Spruce Grove. So that's why there's a decrease there, but overall, again, pretty standard items for a municipality, taxes, utilities, GST, those types of things. And again, nothing that indicated an allowance was necessary. Rounding out financial assets, you can see there's $29 million of investments, so the town did increase its investments with some excess cash. Again, we've confirmed those balances with the financial institution, and those are primarily corporate bonds and some principal protected notes. So anyway, that rounds out the financial assets. Looking at liabilities, town had just over $9.3 million of liabilities halfway down the page. Really not too much to say there other than, standard types of liabilities for a municipality. You can see there's a bit of an increase from last year. Really just has to do with timing. So we weren't able to really nail it down to one item. As part of our work, we also communicate with legal counsel regarding any potential lawsuits and matters that might be required to be recorded as liabilities. Other than that, town has some deposits on account, $2.2 million from various businesses, primarily for work that's being done and deposits held in relation to that. Town also has deferred revenue of $7.8 million. So just wanted to point out, just a second here. Included in deferred revenue, there's a couple things there to note. So deferred revenue is generally money that the town has received in advance of spending it on related costs. So standard types of things, grants such as the Canada Community Building Fund, $2.2 million, and MSI was about $1.8 million. So that's funds, again, that have been received but not spent and will be spent in the future. And then at that point, they will become revenue. Also included in there is developer contributions of $2.9 million. So I was just going to note there, you will notice in your financial statements that there's a restatement explained in note 23. That was done to reflect the update to the town's offsite levy bylaw, which council approved in 2021. And that involved certain, primarily MSI grants being repurposed, and which resulted in a reserve replenishment of about $4 million. So that's explained in note 23 to the financial statements. So again, these are just items town has received the money for but hasn't spent on what they're related to. Long-term debt, town had $31.5 million of debt at the end of the year, so those are debentures with the province of Alberta. We've confirmed those with the province. Just going to make a note here. You can see last year, actually, the town, as I'm sure you know, you did take out a new debenture for the Umbach storm work, which was just over $12 million, so that's why there's an increase. Debt limits are required to be disclosed in accordance with the Municipal Government Act, so those are included in the financial statements, and you can see on this slide, town is well within its debt limits, $32.9 million left that you could borrow without further permission. So you've used about 49% of the town's debt limit compared to last year, which the increase was again due to that new debenture. Now I'm gonna be stuck here. I have to go back. Oh, sorry. Just thought I was gonna have to go the wrong direction. We're good. So rounding out liabilities, total liabilities were $50,759,000. One of the key measures in any public sector financial statement is what's called net debt. So you can see there, financial assets less liabilities left net debt of $3.3 million. So really what that represents is money that's going to have to come from future taxes. So not alarming. Many municipalities, many of our clients are in a net debt position. It just generally it comes from borrowing for capital purposes. Rounding out the statement of financial position, any municipality, the largest asset on the books is going to be tangible capital assets. So I just have a little bit of a summary here. That's probably a little bit small, but you can see there over on the far left-hand side, the town had just over $13.5 million of capital projects that were added to the capital accounts last year. Highlights the library, some downtown redevelopment work, and some road work, and then various other things. But overall, about $13.5 million of assets were added, and you can see how those grant funds that the town used last year were used to fund about half of those costs. So again, total non-financial assets were $245 million. The town's accumulated surplus is just over $241 million. So you can see here a good portion of that surplus is tied up in equity and capital assets at the bottom, second line from the bottom. So just, similar to our personal finances, we would have equity in our homes. This is the same thing. It's equity in roads, buildings, those types of things. You can't go to the bank and say, hey, we want $226 million. It's tied up in the bricks and mortar, so to speak. Beyond that, the town also has various operating and capital reserves, which are, established by council either through budget and or motion. And then at the top of the page, you'll see a little bit of a change from previous presentations. There's an unrestricted surplus of $1.3 million, and then something called a developer deficit, which really represents funds that the town has front-ended for various capital projects. And, generally speaking, we're seeing that type of presentation with more of our municipalities now. Really, it's just carving out what was included in unrestricted surplus before into a separate line item to show what the town has paid for up front. So overall, the town's still in good financial position. If we look at operating revenues, you can see at the bottom of the slide, total operating revenues were just under $43 million. When you look at the budget, it was $40,668,000. There's really one line item to look at here. It's up here under sales and user charges. That's where the most of the variance occurs. So for a reminder, just let you know that the town, I'm sure you remember this, but the town does consolidate the Tri-Leisure Center and the library. So those items are not included in the town's budget column here. And those are primarily the reasons for the difference to budget in the sales and user charges. And then on top of that, the golf course actually had a little bit more revenue last year than was budgeted as well. So those three things together primarily make up the difference down here in total compared to budget. Other than that, very standard types of items for a municipality. You can see, interest was a little bit less than last year. Some of that has to do with the first full year of lower rates after COVID and so on, but hopefully we're done with COVID. So that's operating revenue. Operating expenses, total expenses were $46.4 million, middle column at the bottom there. Again, really there's just a couple things to note there. Starting at the top of the page, recreation and culture, so mirror image of the sales and user charges revenue. There's also expenses that go along with that, so that's primarily, again, where you're going to see part of that is to do with, or most of it is to do with the Tri-Leisure, the library, and the golf course, all being added in there or over budget slightly. Utilities, a little bit over budget due to some extra or more on the water purchasing due to higher consumption. And then protective services, a couple of things there. Some extra accruals for the RCMP wage settlements and true up with City of Spruce Grove on the lease for the RCMP building, which came through this year. So those are, really the primary differences for budget to actual down here at the bottom. For the most part, those are fairly revenue less expense neutral. So other than maybe the water purchases and the RCMP items. So just rounding out the annual surplus, statement of annual surplus, you can see there the town has top line had budgeted for revenues less expenses of just over $3 million. Came in at $3,506,000. And again, really if you want to, nail that down to one item, it's primarily due to the extra costs in the RCMP that I just talked about. Maybe just before we talk about other revenues, if you do look at the bottom here of the page, which is not in your financial statements, you can see that the town, when you adjust the annual operating deficit for amortization, the town did bring in enough funds to cover its expenses last year. So a little bit of extra analysis is required to see that when you're looking at the statements. As far as other revenues go, I did talk about government transfers for capital assets. So that was just $7.4 million. So we looked at that on the capital slide. Beyond that, the town also did get some contributed tangible capital assets. So just as a reminder, when the town receives development assets from developers after they've turned them over to the town, those get recorded at their estimated fair market value at that time. So that's where that $580,000 comes from. And then all other items is for 2021 was all developer offsite levies. So total annual surplus at the very end of the day at the bottom there was $5,284,000. So that's all I'll say about the financial statements. I think that covers the important parts. We also should have a audit findings report in your financial statements. I'm not going to go through it in necessarily full detail, but I will say a few things about that. So part of what we're required to do is report back to the council on various items under Canadian auditing standards. So the items on your screen, we did not find any significant control deficiencies during our work. As far as unusual or accounting policies and or estimates, nothing that was unusual, very normal for a local government. Really, the only significant estimate that the town's made is amortization for capital assets, which is based on the estimated useful life of those assets, how long they will be useful to the town, and that's very standard procedures for any municipality. Corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we did make a few adjustments during the audit, and then after all the smoke cleared, there were a few uncorrected misstatements, and they're noted in your letter, but those are by no means material to the financial statements. It's quite actually normal to have some misstatements in completing an audit. Those really just come about from timing. Significant difficulties encountered during the audit. We didn't find any significant difficulties. The town is more than cooperative. Again, thank you to Terry and all the finance staff for answering all their questions. I guess what gets lost in a presentation like this is I cover this in 20 minutes. Audit takes a lot longer than 20 minutes. Terry can guarantee you of that. There's lots of questions and lots of work going on behind the scenes to get us all the information we need to finish our work and sign off on the financial statements. So overall, things went very well. And we'll be providing a management letter to town management on some other observations and so on that are more of operational in nature, but there's by no means anything we would consider serious. So overall, I think it's congratulations are in order to the town on a good year, and you're still in good financial shape, and the audit went very well. So I'll leave it at that and open it up to any questions if there are any.
Okay, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for sparing us and making it quicker than dragging out for like 2 hours like you did in the past. Appreciate it. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to have some clarification. Not having been on council for 4 years, I hope I'm not going to ask anything that maybe would have been answered at another time. I'm curious if our auditor was able to determine if the taxes that people deferred during COVID, because people were given that option, did that in any way impact the town's bottom line negatively, Or did we find ourselves unable to collect taxes after people had a bit of a break from those?
Thank you, Councillor Hathard. Going from memory, there were no taxes written off in either of the last 2 years that I can remember. And Terry, you can maybe chime in if you'd like to, but as far as I can remember, that did not seem to be an issue at all.
Thank you very much for that, and I'll just add as well, Councilor Hansard, so it was just a deferral for a couple months for residents, and the town of Stony Plain, again, wisely took out an increased line of credit of $10 million to cover any shortfalls that we had any issues of collecting at that point in time, and based on when the provincial government asked for the school tax. That never happened. We never had to access the line of credit. Majority of the people that were deferring were already on monthly payments, the tips, and that made it really, really easy. I think that when we're trying to transition people to do that kind of payment instead of having a one lump sum payment in a year.
Okay.
There was no, I guess, missed payments that would be going to collections.
Okay, very good.
Okay. Anything else for questions of clarity and understanding? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just a clarity question unrelated to the numbers. Just on page 67, under, I'm not sure what we're getting here, definitions or something, tangible capital assets, it says, the town does not capitalize interest costs associated with the acquisition or construction of a tangible capital asset. I was wondering if you could just clarify that and use simple words for me. And then further to it, where would those costs be captured?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Meyer. Yeah, so you're referring to accounting policy 1F, where it indicates that the town does not capitalize interest costs. So it is possible that you would see, not so much in municipal financial statements, but if you were looking at a commercial enterprise and they were taking on a capital project, they may capitalize some of their interest costs. So, you know, if you were borrowing for, say, the Umbeck storm sewer, for instance, that cost of the interest might get added to an asset in a commercial enterprise. The town's interest costs get recorded in the various function costs. So if it's related to, for instance, Parks and Recreation, so anything you're borrowing for Parks and Recreation, interest on that debt would be recorded in that function. Or if you looked at, and I'm not sure, I don't have the agenda right there in front of me, but if you looked at the schedule, the one that's sideways like this, it's Schedule 6, close to maybe the bottom 2/3 of the page there, there's a line called interest on long-term debt, so that's where you can see how much interest was allocated to each function, with the total being $766,801.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments for clarity? Okay. Seeing none, I'll ask you to turn to page 18. I think under government transfers for the TCA, there's a huge increase from what we budgeted, which was 3.1 million, and the actual was 7.4. Can you provide some clarity on that?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I would have to get back to you on that, going by memory, unless Terry, do you recall?
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship, to you and all of council. So what that represents is the actual TCA. So government transfers for TCA is grants that are applied to TCA. And so as a result of carry forwards from previous years, we budget what we know at the time that we plan to do the work, but sometimes the timing of projects are deferred, and so that would likely be a catch-up of carried forward projects from the previous year, and so that's why the revenue was recognized in that year and it was off from budget.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Ask page 48, please. Looking at the accounting estimates, accrued sick pay is $287,000, give or take a few dollars here. In terms of liability to the community, is that a large liability that we should worry about? I know a lot of corporations talk about sick pay and paying out holiday pay because there is that liability attached to that. And how does this rate in terms of for the municipality?
That's a good question. It's not something that we're worried about. It doesn't seem to us that it was an excessive amount. So it's basically the amount that would accrue that's vested at that point in time. You'll notice that the number hasn't changed since last year, so it's still management's opinion that that was still the appropriate number. But yeah, other than that, that's really the only comments I would have on that.
Thank you. And also on the same page, I'm going to ask you to look at the next sentence after that. And the last part of it says, and financial disclosures do not materially mistake the financial statements taken as a whole. So am I to assume or to guess that if they're taken individually, there is some concern with the statements?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, which page was that?
Same page, page number 48, just right under accrued sick pay, where it says that materially the misstate the financial statements taken as a whole, so that there's no, if you read the whole financial statements, from what I understand and read that there's not an issue of misstating concerns, but if you take it individually.
Mr. Dirks, just to clarify, it's just in the management letter
Oh,
under accounting estimates.
Oh, I'm sorry, I was looking at the financial statements.
I'm sorry, yeah, we're dealing with the.
I'm with you now. We have the. No, in total too. They would not materially misstate the financial statements.
Okay, so in whole or in individually, those
Neither.
individual misstatements do not raise any concerns?
No.
Okay, that's good. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Hansard?
Thank you, Your Worship. To our accountant, please. I think it's page 66 of 116. You mentioned in your verbal report that the library, the Tri-Leisure Center, and there was a third entity, were consolidated accounts. Is there a way for us, what I hate to see is if two are doing well and one is struggling, that those struggling entity pull down the way the overall picture looks for those three entities? Would you remind me what the third one is? Library,
Yeah.
Tri-Leisure Center, and...
Yeah, Councillor Hansard. Yeah, actually, my comment was there was two that were consolidated, the Tri-Leisure Center and the library, and then I also made reference to the golf course being over budget on revenue and expenses. Overall, the results were pretty much as budgeted in total for the golf course, but I was just adding that in there for some budget variances. As far as the actual other results of the Tri-Leisure, for example, if you looked at note 17 in the financial statements, it does have some selected financial information so that you can see some of those results without having to go and pick up another set of financial statements. So that's a requirement of the accounting standards.
Okay.
So that's why that's in there. But beyond that, you'd have to actually get a copy of the library statements or the Tri-Leisure Center statements to see the total results.
Okay, thank you. And also just to add to understanding for members of council, both the library and the TLC budget comes before council as part of the corporate plan, so we can actually see it. So I think that's just if there's any variations to that budget that we approved and we saw as members of council during corporate plan, will be noted there.
Okay.
Any other questions for clarity? Nope. Nothing from Councilor Lowry, so thank you very much for your time and the presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank you, and, we work for council, so if you forgot something today and you wake up in the middle of the night, you just wish you would have asked, you can feel free to contact me during daylight hours, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you have, so, thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. All right, members of council, that ends the presentation. So move on to number 5, which is statutory public hearings. There are none scheduled for today, so move on to adoption of council minutes. Councilor Hansford, please.
Your worship, I move that town council approve the regular council meeting minutes of April 11, 2022 as presented.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions for clarity, understanding, or any errors or omissions on the minutes that we've read? Okay, nothing from Councilor Lori, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? And that's carried.
In favor.
Thank you. Moving on to number 7, which is council boards and committees. We do not have no minutes from there, so moving on to number 8, which is bylaws. And looking at the property tax bylaw. Go ahead, administration.
Thank you, and good evening, your worship and council. The exercise of setting an annual property tax rate authorizes council to impose a tax mill rate in respect to collecting taxation revenue to cover the expenditures of the town set out in the approved corporate plan budget process. This evening, we are asking council to consider first reading of the tax bylaw. Typically, all 3 readings are presented to council in one sitting. However, this year we have brought the bylaw earlier to be able to present options, as well as due to a staff absence at the future meeting. The second and third reading will commence May 9th in order to ensure the annex property rate has been approved by Parkland County's Council, of which is being presented tomorrow, April 26th. Tax notices will be distributed following the third reading of the bylaw. In November 2021, Council passed the 2022 corporate plan with a required 4.52% increase to the tax requisition of $771,197. Spring budget adjustments passed in April did not require a revision to the budgeted taxation increase. 2022 taxation year is on the second year of 4 in transitioning the tax rate split to the average of the 8 urban Edmonton Metropolitan Regional Board members less Edmonton. As such, a tax rate split of 1.26 has been implemented. The taxation charts presented include the recommended option as well as 2 alternative options. Each property, whether residential or non-residential, are impacted differently by market inflation. On average, residential realized a market change of 0.45% and non-residential of 1.75%. Assessment notices were distributed in February to all property owners showing the updated assessment for their individual property. For demonstration and simplicity of application, a $100,000 estimate value was used in the charts displayed. Residents and businesses can multiply this netted change by their home assessment to come up with the estimated increase for their property. As presented, this would equate to an annual increase of $7.67 for residential per 100,000 assessment and $52.54 per 100,000 assessment for non-residential. Included in those rates and the bylaw is the requisition for the School Foundation and Meridian Housing Foundation. These requisition amounts are defined by those parties and collected by the town of Stony Plain on their behalf. Alberta school requisition amount increased 3% over 2021, which is allocated by annual equalized assessment. Meridian requisition amount increased by 40%. As also demonstrated in the chart, the Tri-Leisure Facility debenture term expires in 2022 with only $35,585 remaining. This is included within the municipal tax rate section. Administration recommends council approve the bylaw as presented. This concludes my presentation. I would be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your presentation, and thank you for the the report and the options that have been provided for council. Members of council, any questions for clarity and understanding regarding the presentation? Councillor Hanson, go ahead.
Your worship, I probably have a couple of questions, but one right now is, in any way, does the addition of Centre Nord, the French school that is now part of Stony Plains community due to open in September of this year, will that affect in any way an increase in tax dollars, or will they be sharing, whether it's Evergreen Catholic School District or the Parkland School Division, dollars that are already collected through this school tax money?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you and to all of council. That is a great question that I don't know 100% the answer to. The requisition, we're not aware of any further requisition coming forth for that. And so I would believe that it would be within that provincial requisition.
Yes, and that is correct. We had a meeting with the Central Nord, I think last week, and that was one of the questions asked. So they're funded through the same envelope as the regular public system.
Okay, so Your Worship, further to that, if a person, all the tax dollars collected for schools generally are seen to go to the public school system, unless when a person is registering or applying at the school, they have to actually make an overt gesture in checking that they are a member of the Catholic faith. If I'm not mistaken, I think it says the Holy Catholic faith. So if a person's children are attending the Catholic school, you can have your tax dollars go to Evergreen Catholic as opposed to the public school entity, which makes sense because you would like to support the school that is educating your children. Will there be that opportunity for people to check there that the money should be going to the French school? Or once again, is there an anticipation that they will be joining either Evergreen Catholic School Division or Parkland School Division to share in the dollars there?
Okay. So Councilor Hansard, the answer is no. So there's only two that you can choose from, is the public or the Catholic.
Is that because of the British North America Act?
It is, I don't know what act it is, but that is what the tax rate is.
Okay.
All private and all other schools are funded through the public system.
Okay.
Your Worship, too, if I maybe just make some general comment there, and I know this is a topic that comes up often in the public, and I think the other clarification I would make is that there's no direct line between the taxation in Municipality A, so in Stony Plain, and schools in Stony Plain, or St. Albert and St. Albert. Those school foundation, levies essentially goes into the, Edmonton, so to speak, to the government of Alberta to fund the education budget, and that is dispersed as they see fit across the province in various farms operating in capital. So I know I answer that question too from time to time about school funds in Stony Plain and schools in Stony Plain, and just the reality is there's no direct correlation between what's raised in any given municipality and the direct services in that municipality.
Right. That's a good point by the town manager. So all the dollars that are collected through the school requisition do not equal what is coming back to our community to fund the schools in our community.
Okay. And in the case then, Your Worship, for the St. Peter the Apostle Regional Catholic School, if families here in Stony have children who attend that school, those dollars will follow them to the Catholic high school, even though it is not physically located in Stony Plain?
Okay. So again, Councillor Hansard, so the dollars are not directed to a school, it's directed to a funding envelope.
Okay.
So that funding envelope gets divided out and given to the schools within that funding envelope.
Okay,
So
just
it's
so
not, it's
for
not a
those-
one-for-one, so we don't
Okay.
check off
For
Catholic
those who
schools.
are listening, perhaps online, they'll check if they are Catholic, that they are Catholic, and then it's up to that entity to give those dollars wherever they belong, yes or no?
No. No, the answer is that we check it, we just collect the money, we give it to the provincial government. The provincial government takes all the money and then funds the school accordingly to what they have.
All right.
So it's not tied into where it was raised or collected in the municipality,
Okay.
going back to the municipality. As I mentioned, the dollars that we collect in terms of school foundation taxes do not equal what is coming back to community.
Okay.
So it's not a one-for-one. If that's the case, then our schools will be very underfunded at this point in time.
Okay, very good.
Yes, and again, there's only two choices to choose, either you're the public system or here it's the Catholic system.
Okay, very good.
Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Okay.
Sorry, just a
Go ahead.
quick one. So tonight's first reading, second and third reading next week, or?
May 6th, as the May 9th, as the presentation was mentioned.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, clarity and understanding?
So we're just having, sorry, Your Worship, we're just having first reading. Is this our only opportunity to ask any questions regarding the amount?
Yes, you can ask anything that's on the
Yeah,
presentation.
then I do have another question. We just heard from our auditing firm that we have a $5,400,000 and some change $1,000 surplus. What, if I'm understanding that correctly, is there anything that will be explained or needs to be explained to the taxpayers as to why we're proposing this tax increase, given that we have this surplus?
Okay, and I believe that we dealt with the surplus at spring adjustment earlier.
Is that coming up yet?
No, we already dealt with that.
We already dealt with it.
Yes, and it wasn't $5 million.
Okay.
Worship,
So it was only, so I'm not too sure where you heard that $5
Well, he
million.
threw me off tonight when he said we are dealing with a surplus of 500, let me go back to it.
Your Worship, if I may, I can have our acting general manager maybe comment on the definition of surplus in the financial statements versus what we would be tabling, I think, about a month ago from today.
Thank you to Your Worship and all of council. So the financial statement surplus is different than what we presented back in March regarding the surplus. It includes, so financial statement surplus is based on the financial reporting standards and includes and encompasses all of the town's assets as well. So you heard the auditor say this evening that we couldn't just sell off our assets and that, but those assets are contributing to a surplus, overall surplus for the town.
Okay.
So it's more of an industry that would be your equity. It's more similar to that in municipal government.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, Council Hansard, that was on page 18 for future reference. The town actually has an annual operating deficit of $3.5 million. And then when you add in the transfers in items of tangible capital assets, which is to the developer contributions, et cetera, then there's a $5.2 million surplus. But that's the money that it's not actually dollars, it's actual assets transfers to the town, like roads, streets, sidewalks, curbs, and all that stuff. That's given to the town as an asset.
Very good, thank you.
Yes. So we don't have $5.2 million sitting
Okay.
in the. Okay. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Just maybe one question for administration. As mentioned in the presentation, typically we do all three readings in one evening. That's been the status quo for the town of Stony Plain. Today, we are not. We're doing first reading and then looking at second and third reading on May 9th. One of the reasons mentioned was that the annex land has not yet been approved. Maybe If administration can provide information on that, if people are watching that do not understand what the annexed land is and why we have to actually wait for that.
Absolutely. Thank you, Your Worship, through you to all of council. So the annexation agreement, I don't have the date that it was set, but it is up for renewal this year. So 2022 is the last year for that annexation agreement currently. So that means that land that is in that annex section will use the Parkland County tax rate. So that is agreed upon to ensure that it is fair and equitable. If the land has not been developed, we still use the county rate rather than the town rate based on services provided to that area. The annex rate is up for renewal starting in 2023, so you will see something in the fall coming back to council in regards to a recommendation of whether or not we extend that period to use that rate into the future or not.
Thank you. And for questions for clear understanding, Councillor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two questions. The first question through you to administration is in regards to our continual move to the average of 1.35 to 1 that exists within the Edmonton Metropolitan Region Board members, less Edmonton. I'm just wondering, since we started this change, has it been reevaluated to see if 1.35 to 1 is still the average?
Thank you, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Laurie and all of council. So the average actually has changed this year to 1.35 as presented in the presentation. Last year it was 1.36, so it did move slightly, and we did revise our, because it was only 0.01, the last year will be revised.
Excellent, thank you. And a further question to that then. I see we've been provided with a couple of options, which I think options are always great. The visual that I'm missing, though, is where our current proposal does place us in respect to those comparative municipalities. Would it be possible for second and third reading to get a graph that would show us the comparable as to where we would be within the different options, either the option that is presented or the two alternatives? Could we get a graph that shows the comparison of our rate to those same municipalities?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to all of council and Councillor Laurie. I actually have that chart that I can pull up on this screen right now if I can just grab a click share quickly. As I'm bringing this up, this was evaluated. And on the residential side, we will actually maintain our status quo. Sorry, just 1 minute, it's just loading. So on the residential side, we will actually maintain our status quo, which will still be right below Spruce Grove and above Devon. So the gray lines denote the different options. I know it's probably a little bit smaller, and I can also send this out to council as well. But you can see what the 1.22 is the very top one. Then you'll see it progressively go down as it shifts to the non-residential side. So the black line is 1.26. This further gray line, 1.29, and then the eventual 1.35. So just slightly lower than where we were last year. And so I will just note that these rates for the other municipalities are based on their 2021. And so theirs will also shift. And as theirs shift, then we'll have a new chart. So I will just move to the non-residential. So this is probably more of interest. So the 1.22 is the bottom line, and you'll see we'll progressively move up. So the eventual 1.35 will move us to spot 5 from the lowest, so into the mid, right below Devon, and still less than Spruce Grove. however surpassing Leduc, Parkland, and Mornville. And so that will not be the case until that 1.35. So even if we move to the 1.29, we'd still be in the same position.
Excellent. Thank you, Your Worship. So just if I may, if I'm understanding, essentially the moves that we are proposing this year will not actually change a position in the averages for either the residential or the non-residential.
That's correct.
Excellent. Thank you very much. If we could get those emailed out, that would be fantastic, or just included in the package for the next meeting. Really appreciate having the visuals ready tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Members of Council, any more questions for clarity and understanding? Okay, with that, Councillor Loynes, motion to first reading, please.
I move that Town Council give first reading to Bylaw 2658, Tax 22, a bylaw to authorize the rates of taxation to be levied against property within the town of Stony Plain for the 2022 taxation year.
Thank you. Members of Council, open up the floor for questions, comments, and debate on the motion. Councillor Laurie, anything?
Nothing, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay. A question for administration. Based on the couple scenarios that are provided, what are the advantages of town maybe going accelerating the split to the 1.29 rate this year versus leaving at the current 1.22? Obviously, based on the charts that were shown, we're still going to be lower than the middle of the pack until we hit the 1.35. How does that affect our overall revenue budget and our ability to complete projects in our community?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you and to all of council, there really isn't an advantage to accelerating this process. It's really just council's intent. So there's no impact on budget. We're still only requisitioning the full amount that was approved as per the corporate plan for the additional $771,000. So there's really no change. I mean, one advantage or one thought pattern could be trying to accelerate it on a year that maybe we have additional growth or something like that. So it's actually just getting us there through some growth and realizing that rather than increasing the rate for all non-residential.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All in favor?
In favor?
Let's carry moving on to number 9, which is business items in our agenda. 9.1 is the Town of Stony Plains audited financial statements. Administration?
Thank you, Your Worship, and all of council. So earlier this evening, Mr. Dirks from Metrics provided the financial statement presentation, and now we just ask for council's acceptance as per compliance with Municipal Government Act, Section 281. Subsequent to approval, the financial statement and the financial information return will be submitted to the province as required by April 30th.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Meyer with motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the Town of Stony Plain audited financial statements for the year ending December 31st, 2021 as presented.
Thank you. Members of Council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Okay, see none. Again, just on behalf of council and probably our residents, we definitely appreciate the presentation by Mr. Dirks. A lot more interesting than what we get at AM or any other conferences that we go to. As we all know, financial statements and presentation is very, very dry. There are a lot of, not a lot of fireworks in there, per se. But the way that our auditor presents it does make it a little more entertaining, exciting, and he has the knowledge to answer any questions that we do have. So definitely appreciate that. And I'm pretty sure whoever's watching through the town's YouTube channel would appreciate it as well. I'll call the question. All in favor?
In favor?
Thank you. Moving on to 9.2 is the Downtown Redevelopment Report. Go ahead, Administration.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to start out with a few words, and then I'll have our Manager of Engineering speak to some of the report as well. I know I certainly don't have to make council aware that over the course of the last handful of years in construction, but also in the course of probably about 15 years in planning and engagement and so on and so forth, we can say we're almost nearly or absolutely at the end of the construction phase of our downtown redevelopment, which I believe, Your Worship, frankly, is a pretty significant milestone for the community, for the downtown, for this council, previous councils, and the staff that worked diligently over a number of years to get us to where we are today. Your Worship, there's a bit of an ask there for a reserve transfer that's in front of council. I think it's a relatively small amount of the overall budget, but we want to get that on the books. And Your Worship, the other reason I have this in front of you is that we wanted to ensure that there was something officially on the record that identified the project overall and its approaching conclusion. I believe contained in the report as well, there's some talk about an event on May 19th to sort of, I don't know if I'd say reopen, but celebrate the downtown. And it's some of the intent there as well is to acknowledge the challenges. There's no question when you go into this level of work in any particular downtown, doesn't matter if it's a community of 20,000 or 1.5 million, there's impacts on the businesses, the people involved, and so on and so forth. And I know that we had a number of those over the past few years. I believe truly, Your Worship, that we did a good job overall on mitigating what we could and being open about what we couldn't mitigate and being clear about the impacts there. So, Your Worship, frankly, I'm quite proud to have this report in front of council this evening. And I'll stop there and see if our Manager of Engineering has a few things further to add, and we can answer questions after that.
Thank you, Town Manager. I just want to, Your Worship of Council, I just want to supplement the Town Manager's opening words. Town Administration was very happy to see the downtown redevelopment come to a close of significant construction in late 2021. This project, over all of its phases, brought several welcome improvements to the downtown core that provide businesses and residents a great destination to promote growth and community for the entire town. I also want to take a moment to extend a special thanks to all downtown businesses and area residents that worked with the town and its contractors so that this redevelopment project could come to reality. We understand that the projects like this bring challenges to local businesses and residents, and we are very grateful for their support and patience over all phases of construction. As the town manager alluded to, town administration wanted to take this opportunity to provide council an update on the final cost of the project over all phases. Great efforts were made to complete this project within budget by town staff and its contractors. However, in order to complete the remaining contractual items, the town is asking for an additional $90,000 to address final items such as planters on 50th Ave, minor deficiencies, and final engineering costs to bring this project to a final close. That is the end of my brief presentation. I'll welcome any questions from council.
Thank you for the presentations. Members of council, any questions or comments regarding the downtown redevelopment report? Councilor Laurie, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. More of a comment, just noticed being downtown over the last little while that there are a significant number of the bollards and the lampposts in where the collars at the bottom seem to not be installed in a manner as to where they are fixed in place, and they are constantly being raised up, they're exposing wires, all those kind of things. Is that something that's on the deficiency list? Is that something that just is, yet to be completed? I'm just looking for an update on that.
Thank you. I think Councilor Laurie is referring to the skirts on the bollards and things.
Your Worship, to the Councilor Laurie. I don't know those exact locations. We do have another inspection planned for this spring to address any final deficiencies and confirm things. So we'll absolutely be taking a look at those, and if there's any items that need to be addressed, that would be addressing it then. Okay,
and then maybe another question to that is that is considered deficiency. Is that correct?
Your Worship, if there are exposed wires, we would consider that a deficiency. Yes.
Okay. And what about if the skirt is moving around?
If it's loose in any way or not to where we would have expected it for final installation, we will be addressing that as well.
Councilor Laurie?
Excellent, thank you. That covers it. The other question I had was just in relation to the roundabout and the securement. I've seen over the last while some activities going on the roundabout, and particularly some skateboarding down into traffic. It appears that there was at least one chain missing, and so it was a little bit of a hairy situation to have some youth using that as a skateboard prop and coming into traffic with vehicles, some paying attention, some maybe not. So just hoping that there's a way that we can address that as well.
Thank you for that. And it's noted by administration.
Your Worship, I can maybe comment on that. And, I think I would just comment a little bit broader even, and certainly with the changes that have been done and the work that's gone on. And, I know it's a big part of what I believe council wants to do. And certainly, the town as a whole is want to get more people downtown. I would expect that as we do that over the course of, this spring, summer, fall, and moving forward, we will find other little, I would say oddities or certain things that will have to be readjusted or checked out or identified in some manner of fixing it or finding a different way to do it or what have you. It's a little bit of going from design and construction to the actual function and the livability and how it works now. And I would expect over the course of the next few years we'll find out different things like that and have to come up with solutions and address them in one way or shape or the other. So,
Thank you for that. The Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I think it's important that we acknowledge a few things this evening. One is that administration and our staff worked very diligently with the businesses downtown. I think I heard from a number of them to begin with the first year I was on council of the problems that were going on that took a great turn to work with our residents and our businesses downtown. And I think the other thing that was really important, it went through a downturn in our economy as well, which was devastating to all of our businesses downtown. And I think it's important to know that that campaign that you did to bring people back downtown, I think worked fairly well within the community. So I think we did a fantastic job of bringing people from out of town, people from within our own community, and trying to do the best that we could do to support the local businesses downtown. And I think we're looking forward to the grand opening of this. Even though it's the top end is just really a cosmetic, it's the underground that you can't really see that was the most important part of this. And I think that's a part that quite often our residents and our businesses forget, is just because it looks pretty on the top wasn't the means to be of what we did. It was what was underground that needed that done. So thank you for that. Secondly of all, when I read there are $90,000 in additional expenses required to complete the project in 2022, including planters at 50th Ave, minor deficiencies and final engineering costs. A bright light goes off when you talk about minor deficiencies that we are paying for. Usually deficiencies are covered in the cost of doing business for the contractors that have done the business. Can you elaborate why we would be paying for deficiencies?
Through your worship to Councillor Bletchfield, it's a great question. If there are deficiencies that were caused by the contractor, the town doesn't bear those. Now, what can happen is sometimes there's an item that we have to place an interim measure, such as a patch of asphalt, for example, just to get it over to the next season and then do a final paving. And I can't itemize every single thing. Sometimes there's some additional costs that are carried over. Maybe there are items such as the final sidewalk finishing that maybe need to be addressed. Now that may be roped into the final list of final deficiencies, for example, but not necessarily a deficiency as a traditional item. In projects like this that are quite complex, there is often you started with a certain amount of expectation on your line items as a unit rate cost, and some of those items accrue over time. Maybe you had an extra few meters of linear pipe that you had to install that your planning hadn't accounted for, and those just slowly accrue over time, and those can consolidate the costs. As the town manager had pointed out, this isn't for a $15 million project, $90,000 over the whole scope. It isn't a small amount of money, but it's certainly over the grand scheme of all phases. It's something that we tried to keep great cost controls and great emphasis on ensuring that we're only paying for items that go into the ground or items that the town is obligated to pay. So I don't know if I've answered your question or touched on it.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important that we understand that deficiency is not always, because I think public, when they look at that, deficiency should be what the developer has done, but there is a different term for deficiencies, which we just heard from you this evening. So I thank you for that.
Thank you. And just to add to that, so in the intersection in the corner of 50th and 50th Street, there was some additional charges that the town incurred because we found something in the ground that was not supposed to be there. At that time, that intersection was supposed to be done along with phase the 51st and 50th intersection. But when they came to the 50th Avenue intersection, when they dug it up, they found a high-pressure aqua gas line and also a TELUS utility line there, which was not able to be moved by us. It had to be moved by the two providers. And at that time, it was done. We did what work that was able to be done, and then to open that intersection up for the winter instead of leaving it fenced off, the town took the initiative to have that paved as a throwaway lift so that we can actually have that intersection open. So that was not part of the original scope of the project, and that's probably why that's added as. And Deputy Mayor is right. When you say minor deficiencies, it should be minor overages or additions would be better than deficiencies, because I'm under the same understanding when I was reading this, like, well, I'm not paying for any deficiencies that we contracted this out, and if it's not to code or it's deficient, then the contractor is paying for it, not us. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's a question. Just at the tail end of the background information on the item, it addresses a comprehensive downtown parking plan as required to plan for the growth of downtown in the future. Through you to administration, I'm just curious, timing for that, and if it's in our corporate plan or when the residents could expect to see something like that, or when we could, for that matter.
Your Worship, I see our Manager of Engineering shaking his head that it's not included in the corporate plan. So that's the answer there to the direct question. A little bit further along those lines, yeah, when you want to plan to grow and expand at downtown, parking has to be part of that conversation. Council's aware there's a number of town-owned lots that function to a degree as parking lots for the public. But I believe even using the library as a positive example of how that can change too over time. What may at one point be a public parking lot is also a project waiting to happen. Typically, we'd like to see more built projects than acres of parking lots in your downtown. So I think what this is referring to is that as we continue to kind of move forward, look at other types of development, encourage that development, we have to also be walking along with some, more effort going into parking strategies, is I think the intent of the comment there.
Sorry, just in part of my question was in terms of a timeline, if there's any dates.
Sorry, Your Worship, I didn't catch the question.
Is there a timeline for the planned comprehensive parking?
We can double check what we have on the books internally, but I believe the answer at this point is that it's not contained in the corporate plan, which would put it more than 3 years out.
Yeah.
But we can take a look at that and just get if there's any change there, have it sent out to council via email.
Yeah. And that's probably appropriate in terms of planning. With the downtown just being open this year, having a celebration on May 19th, you definitely want the community to experience it, use it, and then as we kind of see how it goes in the next couple of years before we can actually determine a proper plan going forward. Because right now, after it's just being completed and open, well, you can't make a plan because we haven't seen how the community or tourists and other residents from the surrounding regions come here using our downtown. Any other questions, comments for the presentation? No, I just wanted to again tackle on to what Deputy Mayor has mentioned about the work that our contractors and administration did with the business owners. Being a business owner and having property downtown, I've seen lots of stuff that was unexplained through construction season. Finding water vaults that were never registered on our plans, but yet interesting part of our history. So if nobody's actually seen that, there was actually a couple of concrete cement water vaults that were built into the ground where it collected rainwater from the existing houses on the west side of Main Street. And yes, I say houses because at that time there was houses on the west side of Main Street and not businesses. The water flowed in there, and then when the fire department needed water to address a fire, that's where they would pump the water into the thing and then back. So another interesting piece of history. We've also found oil tanks within the downtown. Just like every old Main Street, there is tanks of oil and empty and full down there that we never had to accommodate for or register in the past, but now we have to, so that's good that the staff were able to address those in a safe and timely manner. There's also a tunnel that we found, which is very, very interesting, a tunnel that led to a bank, needless to say, way back in the days. I can't verify when that happened, when the tunnel was dug, but I can verify that the building was breached, because I did go in the basement of the building, and there is new cement that covered up the hole, so I'm not too sure if they went in or went out. But the history was that it was a bank, and shortly after the time frame, that bank did fold and went back to the city of Edmonton, and then another bank came back later, so in that time, it does make sense, because if you can't access your bank, you can't withdraw your money because there's no money to be withdrawn. So it's just a theory, and it's just kind of interesting that we have that. And also through downtown, we found lots of old power poles. So over the last few years of transitioning from wood power poles to underground, I think the easiest way was just to bury it in the ground along with the underground wiring. So interesting, needless to say, but definitely appreciate the work that the administration, the contractors, and the residents and downtown business owners had to deal with. But as mentioned, it's not the nicey stuff that's on top that we wanted to do as a community. We were definitely addressing the underground work that was over 60 years old, and they were ready to fail. So in terms of being prudent and making sure that we plan out our capital replacements, this is one of the projects that I look forward to over 20 years ago, and to finally have it done now is a great accomplishment for our community as we continue to mature as, I guess, a small town to a larger town. That's very good. Thank you. With that, Deputy Mayor, I'll ask you to make the motion, please.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. The Town Council accept the Downtown Redevelopment Report for information and to approve the transfer of $90,000 from the Roads Capital Reserve to fund the completion of the project in 2022.
Good. Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Members of Council, any questions or comments or debate on the motion that's presented? Okay, see none, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
In favor?
Okay, thank you, and that is carried. Moving on to 9.3, which is the 2022 first quarter report. And can you imagine? We were just celebrating Christmas 3 days ago with the snow. And the first quarter's already gone. Administration?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just very quickly, as Council is aware, there's a number of operational facts and numbers and updates contained in the quarterly report. At this point, Your Worship, I just want to draw a bit of attention. I'm sure Council noticed that the design and layout has changed. It's starting to fall, I guess I'll say fall in line with the design of the strategic plan, and you'll see more of our sort of corporate documents going along these lines over the course of the next little while, Your Worship. So I'll stop there. Certainly, myself and staff members are able to answer any questions or provide further comment if Council so desires. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Members of Council, you had the opportunity to look over the report. It is included in our agenda. Any questions and comments regarding the report that we've seen presented to us? Councillor Meyer, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just curious, looking at the section for the fire department, the second paragraph speaks about the members transitioning from paid on-call classification to casual classification. I was wondering if administration could just expand on that change for us.
Okay, and that'll be page 93
Yeah,
or
I'm sorry,
94?
I can't look it up.
93.
My mouse isn't working, sorry.
Technology, you gotta love it until it doesn't work.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Meyer and the rest of the council, certainly our firefighters were classified as paid on call. And when we went through and looked at CRA and other definitions that have evolved, we're currently not really paid on call. We're actually casual. There is, from a CRA perspective and a definition, the correct term is casual. So we tried to align our fire department with the rest of our organization because we do have other employees that are considered and paid in the same way as what our paid on call or volunteer or now casual firefighters are currently paid. So we're just aligning all of our employment categories through the town, and the fire department was one of the last to bring into that casual classification. So nothing has changed for the employees, and from that perspective, from the firefighter perspective, other than there might be some more reporting and CRA things that are a little bit more transparent with respect to it. But generally speaking, there's not a lot of change for them from that perspective. And the hourly wage component, we transitioned to that a few years ago, and this continues to consider that and maintain that.
Thank you.
Hey, Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. General Manager, you just made reference to pay, and I'm just wondering if you can clarify the pay in equation to what the rest of the town staff are being paid.
Your Worship, through Councillor Plesko, so we do have employment classifications with the town of Stony Plain. I'm a full-time employee, and I have certain benefits that are provided to me through that classification. We have part-time, we have seasonal, we have permanent part-time, we have permanent employees on a term perspective, and we have casual employees that function with the town of Stony Plain or work for us. With that, there's an hourly wage that when people come to work and they do their job, or they're required or called to complete a task for us, they're paid that hourly wage or that agreed upon fee. And then we do our due diligence with respect to our timesheets to ensure that we capture all of the CRA and provincial deductions that we have to capture. And with each classification, you may not get a full benefit package, but there's certainly some benefits that the town of Stony Plain provides to each of those categories.
Just a supplemental to that too. Thank you, please. Yes, again, going back to the pay structure, are all of our town employees paid at the least the minimum wage for every hour of participation that they put into something?
Your Worship, through to Councillor Plesko, I'm not schooled or up to speed on exactly what wage is provided to which job title we might provide to the town of Stony Plain, but when it comes to minimum wage, there is a provincial legislation that we have to meet. We certainly do meet that, and I think I would probably suggest we probably exceed that more often than not.
Thank you.
Sure, just to supplement that, Your Worship, through you to all of Council and Council Palechko, our wage grid, our salary and casual and union and non-union grids, so there's different grids based on hours. Our lowest grid cell, I guess you could say, does exceed minimum wage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for clarity and understanding? Councillor Hansford, go ahead.
Your Worship, we can also make a comment.
Yes.
I just want to comment on the section of the quarterly report that has to do with promoting mental health and wellness. And as we all know, there's been a lot of people who are struggling with various things as a result of coming out of the COVID 2 years. And I was particularly touched by the poem, She the Moon, that was written on page 17. If you haven't read it or paid attention to it, I would urge you to do that, or I'll read it to you if you would like me to do so. I used to do that in oratory in school, and I've won awards on that. So I really appreciated the emphasis that the town has taken in this issue, and also being proactive in an area that needed some attention. So I just wanted to bring that out. And as always, the reports that we get from through our staff and administration for the quarterly reports are always very impressive.
Thank you for that comment, Councilor Hansard. So for members of council and then those that are watching, it's on page 103 of our agenda package. Thank you for bringing that. And you're absolutely right. Mental health is something that we need to deal with as a community. Any more comments, questions regarding the quarterly results report? Okay, seeing on page 94, please. All right, so I'm looking at the 2021 Q1 responses. Can administration provide which numbers are accurate?
Sorry, Your Worship, can you, I'm not following your question.
Okay, so on page 94, there's the Q1 responses, and it says that the town of Stony Plain in Q1 2022 had 63 responses. But if you look down a little bit further, it says the town of Stony Plain had 80 responses. So I'm just asking which numbers are correct.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I'm looking at that now. I'll get that clarification for you. I would suggest that we probably likely did more in the county than we did in town in the quarter. So likely the 63 and the 80 below need to be changed and switched. The two numbers are the same. One says, so at the top of the page, it says Parkland County, 80 responses in Q1 2022, and 63 for the town of Stony Plain. And at the bottom, the town and the county are switched from a 63 to 80. So I understand your question. I'll get that clarity. And if you would like me to put that out via email to let you know what it is, but I would hazard a guess that the 63 is likely the town of Stony Plain and the 80 is Parkland County.
Okay, and that's typically how it is in Q1 of 2020 and 2021. But however, if you look on the category breakdown, there is 30 alarms in Q1 for the town, which would more than explain the increase in the number of calls within the town of Stony Plain.
Correct.
Okay, so you'll figure out which number is correct.
Correct.
To me. And then in terms of the number of alarms, because that has been a growing issue within our kind of protective services area, is at what point in time, we don't want people not to have alarms, but alarms that have been going off, false alarms, businesses or apartment buildings not maintaining their electrical systems, alarm systems that are causing these alarms. Are we looking at ways to address that so that our members are not called out? Because 30 is quite a bit considering, obviously, if you look at the previous quarters, the town swimming calls were 65 in 2020 and 48 in 2021. So just looking at that, 30 in 2022 is almost half of what was, a little more than half of 2021, which is a huge increase.
Sorry, I saw Deputy Mayor with his hand up, so I'll answer your question and then we'll go from there. So Your Worship, certainly we did pass a bylaw that included fee structure related to false alarms. The fire department definitely does track that based on that false alarm bylaw, and we will send an invoice related to those. If you If you walk around town, there's a ton more TELUS and other alarm system signs on people's front lawns. There certainly is a break-in period for a lot of people with respect to their alarms and toast and other things that get cooked in their homes. Sometimes we deploy a truck and might get turned around halfway there or as we're leaving the fire hall, but certainly it gets logged as a call because we do ask a crew to come in. Definitely, we do have some frequent flyers that the fire department will address and send letters to say that the next alarm certainly is going to be invoiced and there will be a fine levied. So we do have a process in place to assist us with those false alarms.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Worship. In addition to that town comment, I'm looking at the medical ones. There's 27, and I know not long ago we heard a speaker from AHS speak to us at a conference in regards to how they're working to resolve some of these issues, and yet we continually see a high medical aid call for our fire department that has no support where other communities have support from the province for funding. Are we working with the province along the way here to eliminate these medical calls back to who actually should be doing the medical calls? And what are we doing towards the funding aspect of it, I guess? Sorry, Carl.
Your Worship, through to Councillor Pletchko. So it's a bit of a tricky question and topic. Certainly, the ones that are getting paid and compensated from Alberta Health Services have a full-time medical response contract with Alberta Health Services. So City of Spruce Grove in the region certainly falls within that category. Edmonton, Calgary is not, but Red Deer, and there's a couple others, Fort McMurray, they certainly do provide that level of service for, and are contracted by Alberta Health Services. Stony Plain isn't, but we're part of the medical first responder program that Alberta Health Services does offer as an opportunity to sign up. There is no compensation financially for that program. As you know, there's shortages and there's been documented shortages of medical response across the province. And unfortunately, some of our first responder professionals in Alberta have been picking up that slack from time to time. If we chose not to respond to medical calls and backed out of the medical first responder program, that certainly is that's an option. I think that would provide a huge gap in our community, and some of that response that's critically needed in a timely manner doesn't happen, and I think there would be some discussions that we probably would not like to have related to the outcomes of not responding. So you know as well as I do, being a first responder, if someone needs you want to get there and you want to help them as quickly as possible. We do have a structure in place that permits us to go and take care of our residents when they need to be taken care of and at least give them some quality of care until the higher or advanced level of care arrives. I would expect that the province is aware of this challenge, and I would expect that they're doing what they need to do behind the scenes to try and improve that situation through their provincial budgets.
Well, I appreciate your comments. I think no time is better than today. Then we get on the provinces behind and ask them for some of this funding. We're in a huge surplus, or going to be in a huge surplus. We're based at 85 and we've been over 100 the whole time. I think it's a great time for us to advocate for this province, for them to support the fire services that have not been supported over the past years. And I would not want to see our fire department not respond to stuff, Carl. That is not what I'm getting at. I think it's just a really great time for us to be able to advocate for the province, and the sooner the better. Thanks.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Laurie?
Thank you, Your Worship. And actually, I just wanted to follow on with Deputy Mayor Pletchko's comments a little bit. I mean, you know, I completely agree. I think I've voiced my opinion in chambers many, many times on the MFR program and the lack of funding from Alberta Health Services, and that, you know, as much as I am 100% supportive of having our first responders respond to these medical events, it's a bit of an offload and a download that the province is using as a crutch, and it's not a great situation. What I am curious about, though, is if we have aggregated costs in respect to, I guess it would be the 36 different medical events that we attended in the first quarter that we can utilize when we are having discussions with AHS. And then my second question on that is in regards to what I would call cost controls. We know that the required number of members to respond to a medical event can be significantly different than the required number of members to respond to a structure fire. So I'm curious if we have any controls in place that would essentially limit the number of members who would be eligible to show up and be paid to attend a medical call versus the number of our casual employees who could show up. I'm curious, if we had 30 casual employees show up to a medical call, would all 30 casual employees be compensated for that medical call?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, General Manager.
Your Worship, through the Council, Lori. Certainly, we do call logs. So on the 30 plus calls that we would have done from a medical perspective, we would certainly be able to go back and track and identify what truck went out, how many people were on it, and what the payout would be related to that particular response. So definitely, if needed, we can certainly get those cost calculations together very quickly related to all of those calls. So that's question one, I believe. Question two, with respect to 30 firefighters coming to the hall for a particular call. I do recall, and I'd have to confirm this with the fire chief, but we were certainly moving to a system where there was a first call, second call, third call type structure in place, so that we weren't having or needing that many people coming to the hall for different types of calls. Certainly, when you've got a structure fire, I agree with you. It's all hands on deck, and you need to get out there quickly and limit the spread and protect the asset. When it's a lift assist, likely 2 to 5 members is probably sufficient, depending on what Alberta Health Services provides us with information with respect to it, because you might need 10 people to assist with that particular call if when you get there and understand what the circumstances are. So I think that I can confirm with you after I speak with the chief related to the structure change that that we've looked at and modeled. And I can do that via email if that's appropriate.
Thank you, and yeah, I'd appreciate a response and email to that. I think it would be imperative and important for council to understand as we move forward in our future service level discussions, the different methodologies that are used in regards to responding to the different types of calls, what the costs have been to provide the MFR program for these particular calls, and also if you could include the statistics of the number of times that Alberta Health Services has actually stood down the Stony Plain Fire Department after they've requested their assistance, because I believe, if memory serves me right, we incur the cost to pay those employees who show up if AHS has stood us down after they've requested our assistance.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councilor Loyens, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just to switch gears a little bit and talk about the Tourism Ambassador Program, as this was recently launched in December and we're starting training in May, it does say that we had 10 businesses registered, which equates to 24 people. Is this what was kind of our expectations, was about 24 or so? Or what were our expectations from administration for these ambassadors? And was it only businesses that wanted to register? There was no general public that wanted to participate?
Your Worship, I can speak to that in a little bit, but frankly, I'll have to ask our General Manager of Strategic Services to probably respond in detail to some of those questions. I certainly just can't do that. I don't know the answer. So I will, the comment I will make, because I know it was a conversation I had, I did have a conversation with our local executive director from the Chamber of Commerce who, amongst other things, we were on the phone for about 45 minutes. I know that she expressed, she was quite excited about that program, looking forward to it, and so on and so forth. So I can pass that along because I do know that answer, but we'll ask our General Manager of Strategic Services to respond directly and with the detail I think that was requested there.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Not sitting, I'm just going to ask members of council to turn to page 110. And this will be the numbers from the planning department. And I'll look at the value by building permit type. And that's the last little part, graph on the page there. As you can see from that, last year's first quarter building stats were just over $4 million. The 5-year average is just a little over $5 million. 2022, close to $13 million. Right. When we talk about things that we do in a community to lay the groundworks for building a better community, Q1 stats are showing that. The decisions, the comments, the debate, the strategic planning that we've done is accumulating to this. Having growth by 2.5 times a 5-year average. It is a great accomplishment for members of council and administration. So I just want that we don't lose sight of that, of the stuff that we do is working. Any other comments, questions? Seeing none, Councillor Hansard, I'll ask you to make the motion to accept, please.
Your worship, I move that town council accept the 2022 first quarter report for information.
Thank you. Members of council, any questions, comments, and debate on the motion? Go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. I thought I'd just pass along to administration appreciation from a resident who participated in the digital economy program, and they found it quite helpful, and so I just thought I'd pass that along to admin.
Thank you for passing that along. Any other questions, comments, debate? Seeing none. Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor?
In favor?
Okay. Thank you. That is carried. Moving on with our agenda, number 10 and 11, council information and council discussion. So this is the time that members of council can update the rest of council on items that are happening in our community or in their boards and commissions, and anything that you hear from residents to bring forward to our administrative staff. Councilor Laurie, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to start off by recognizing that it is National Volunteer Week, and we do have our National Volunteer Week celebration later this week. I obviously want to extend a huge amount of gratitude out to all of the volunteers in our community, in our region, and all over. Volunteers are imperative to many organizations to provide many of the things that go on in our community, whether it be things like farmers' days or different sports organizations. Those things don't happen without volunteers. So very, very happy to ensure that they are recognized and that they are quite celebrated as well. In addition, I just wanted to thank the town staff. I also wanted to thank Councillor Loynes and Councillor Meyer for joining in the annual pickup week here that we had. It was a little cold and a little windy, but it seems that day seems to always end up a little bit like that. But it was a great time. We kind of went through the whole downtown core, and again, amazing turnout by the staff, and great to see everybody out there pitching in and doing their part. That's all for me this evening, Your Worship.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Hansard.
Your worship, I just wanted to express appreciation for our opportunity to meet with the new French school, not French immersion, but the new French school when we had our partnership meeting with them this next week. Also, I'm noticing there's quite a bit of people getting excited on social media about upcoming Farmers' Days, Blueberry Bluegrass, and so forth. And it's wonderful to know that festivals are back in Stony Plain, and we all have that to look forward to. I am very appreciative of the report that we got this evening, and look forward to the next couple of months while we're celebrating a lot of things that go on in summertime.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hansard. Councillor Meyer.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would just echo my fellow Councillor Laurie's discussion topic there about picking up garbage on Main Street with Councillor Loynes, and it'll hopefully look nice and sharp with those new banners at the, we'll call it a grand opening for Main Street, May 19th.
Thank you, Councilor Meyer. Deputy Mayor?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to echo Councillor Laurie regarding the volunteers. I think it's important that we know that our volunteers are what help create a community, and they do a very good job within our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Loynes?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to mention that this Friday, April 29th, is the World Wish Celebration Day. It is the anniversary of the founding Make-A-Wish Foundation, and all of their chapters and affiliates come together to reflect on how many wishes were made and how many kids and other people they were able to help. And that is actually an area that is very near and dear to my heart, as we've had many family members help make wishes come true. So just thought I'd put that out there.
Thank you. I just wanted to just say thank you to our residents and volunteers that make a community strong. Without the volunteers in the community, we as a town are unable to accomplish what we do. If you look at the number of hours that are donated and volunteered by members of our community and surrounding area, we would not have the funds to be able to pay for all those hours of service. So definitely thank you very much to the volunteers. And speaking of Pitching Week, I was driving around town this week. A lot of people on 779 and 628 and Golf Course Road that were picking up, doing their part in the pitching. So thank you for those individuals that I did see and wave to. Another point is just wanted to thank the Town Stony Plain Fire Department. Earlier this month, we had a structural house fire in the Town Stony Plain. Regardless if we call our fire department volunteers, paid on call, or casual, they did a phenomenal job, as they do each and every time that they're called out. The fire department did what they needed to do. First thing was to preserve life, which they did get the occupant and the dog outside safely. That was number one. Number two was to mitigate any collateral damage, and that was done efficiently and well as well. So appreciate that. Definitely the work that the Stony Plain Fire Department does and services for our community. Okay. With that, that's it for me. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, administration, for providing the reports, and council. We are adjourned.